tonight, Ghana's proposed cybersecurity bill, a threat to free speech or a necessary shield.
The ramifications for you being seen as contravening some of these offenses make this draconian, make this unsuitable for the current day and age and society that we have.
We have details as pressure mounts on government to completely drop the proposed bill. We'll hear from the minority in parliament, which is accusing government of seeking to introduce criminal libel laws.
The big economic policy that is submitted just mentions these programs, that a figure is put by it. The minister will show up at committee level to defend.
We'll have details of all of these here on Top Story, brought to you always by Telecel Connecting Energies, also by Holy Insecticide Spray and Coil. Enjoy a holy sleep and Short Pension Trust. Into the future with you. Well, government tonight is facing a fierce backlash over a proposed Cybersecurity Amendment Bill, which critics say poses serious threat to free speech and individual freedoms. The bill, sponsored by the Communications Ministry, aims to safeguard the country's digital space and prevent cyber abuse. However, its sweeping provisions sparked widespread disapproval, with many arguing that it could be used to stifle dissent and muscle free speech. As the bill undergoes stakeholder consultations, its contents are drawing sharp public criticism, with many wondering if the government is prioritizing cybersecurity over citizens' rights. We'll get reaction shortly, but member of our legal desk, Kwaku Asante, has been pouring through the content of this bill and joins me with some details. Kwaku, which sections of this bill is facing these challenges?
So, Brace, a number of the sections in this bill have all been facing set scrutiny on social media and also on mainstream in the last few days. Particularly, if you look at Section 4A and 59B, is what deals with investigative and prosecutorial powers. Under this section, the CSA, that is the Cybersecurity Authority, will be empowered to investigate and prosecute cybercrime, freeze property, and confiscate assets. In fact, specifically says it also imposes some penalty. In fact, imprisonment of up to 5 years or a fine of up to 20,000 penalty units or both. The concern here is that this section seem to merge regulation, investigation, and prosecution into one body, and it creates a lot of room for political abuse or intimidation, especially when it comes to cases involving digital activism and all of that. And then another part of this bill that is getting a lot of flack is the police powers that the civil society organization CSA is going to get. Section 20B actually authorizes the Cybersecurity Authority's Director General and their officers to exercise full police powers. This includes arrests, search, seizures, and whenever they do that and they find any offense or you resist or anything of that sort, you could go to prison up to 5 years or face a fine of up to 20,000 penalty units. Then it compels disclosure of information. So the Cybersecurity Authority can also demand information from any person or company, and failure to comply with this request is a criminal offense. And you can face a term of imprisonment of 1 to 2 years or 10,000 penalty units maximum. And so that has also sparked some concerns. Another part is the search, seizure, and preservation of data when it comes to this. If you look at the bill, it says CSA investigators are allowed to obtain ex parte, that is, without notice to you, they can go to court and get orders to access, seize, or preserve computer data. And if you fail to comply, you can go to jail for 5 years or suffer a penalty of 20,000 penalty units. They also have a power of entry and inspection, even without a warrant. So the Cybersecurity Authority can enter and audit every premise and examine computer systems. They can just look into the computer, even without a warrant. But that is provided they give a 7 days notice. So if they give you 7 days notice, they can just then barge in, look into your computers if they suspect certain things are going on wrong over there. And then this part is where the minority particularly talking about how it will criminalize free speech. If you look at Section 67A, It says that a person shall not use an electronic device or a medium to deliberately spread false or misleading information with the intent to deceive or manipulate a person or fact. If you do this, you can go to jail between 3 and 5 years. The question is who determines what is misleading, what is false, and so these conversations have been quite big on Twitter. And then you look at 67A and 3B. It says a person shall not create a false identity online or a fake social media profile for the purpose of following an adult where the contact is unacceptable. If your name is Samuel Kojo Brace on your ID, but you created another Facebook account with another name, the concern is that this provision may allow the government to come after you, especially when they say that you are spreading false information, among other things. And then this, particularly maybe Samuel Kojo Black will be interested. It says a person shall not use an online computer service or any other electronic device to track the location of another person without the consent of that person. So if you track someone's movements without the consent of that person, we know that in the last 3-4 years, Samuel Kojo Black was big on tracking President Akufo-Addo's flight movements and all of that, which he said at the time exposed the profligate expenditure of the government at the time. If you do this tracking, you can also spend some time in jail. So really interesting insights in there with this draft bill, which is still undergoing stakeholder consultation. The ministry have given some time for the public to submit memorandum in terms of what exactly they want to see in the revisions and all of that. And these particular sections, about 8 of them, have in particular sparked some agitations among the public.
Well, former Information Minister Kojo Oppong Nkrumah says the bill is dangerous and an encroachment on free speech. Listen to him.
A draft. I want to consult on that draft. From what I have seen as a former information minister, this draft is dangerous, though it's not surprising. And let me explain why it's not surprising. It's not surprising because I think the president first announced it, that they are going to use the national security apparatus to go after people who make comments on social media that they consider, for whatever reason, whether it's under hate speech or it's under whatever, they consider it unfavorable. They're going to search for your IP addresses and then get the security apparatus to go after you. The president himself said it. So it's not surprising that his minister is now following up with a draft bill with such wild provisions in there. What is dangerous about it is that over the last set of decades, various countries have been moving away from criminalizing speech. There are other remedies for speech that may be deemed unfavorable, most of them civil, but not necessarily criminalizing it. And that's why you would recall that even the Criminal Libel and Sedition Act was repealed by the Kufuor administration. There are still remnants of laws that still seek to criminalize speech. For example, this law that is being used a lot, publication of false news, with intent of causing fear and panic, is one of those laws that actually still needs to be repealed. Instead of repealing that to advance, democratic freedoms, the government is now seeking through this draft that it wants to consult on to enact legislation that will now even ensure that when you put up a comment in your chat groups and they find it offensive according to their criteria, you could go to jail. And I think it's a very dangerous, encroachment into the area of free speech. The government needs to tread cautiously.
Now, that's a former Information Minister, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah. Now, IMANI, Africa's Vice President for Innovation and Strategy, Selorm Branttie, also says the punishment prescribed in the bill are draconian and completely unsuitable.
We are looking at sweeping changes to the current digital infrastructure in terms of the people who should partake in it, as well as those of us who are consumers of social media or digital media. And it is therefore very important that we really look at what we as users or we as people who communicate on a daily basis have the right to do vis-a-vis the government's responsibility to also ensure security, law and order. And what we believe is that a lot of the lecturing for the cybersecurity bill, for example, is ambiguous in terms of the kinds of offenses that they are being talked about, that are being discussed, and the ramifications for you being seen as contravening some of these offenses make this draconian, make this unsuitable for the current day and age and society that we have, because you are looking at things that would either be minor or major and bottling it up into just one category and then criminalizing all of it. There are instances where people create secondary social media accounts or secondary digital identities, not because they want to stalk someone, but it could be interpreted as so. There are a lot of us who have what we call backup accounts that they can sometimes use to make commentary. And sometimes even by virtue of where you work and all of that, you might not be at liberty to be making certain statements. And therefore, people use some of these backup accounts for things like that. But that is not even the core of it. The core of it is that it is a dangerous thing to have laws like this, or some of the stipulations in laws like this, dictating what should be the government's response or the security apparatus' response to some of these things that happen digitally, because in the wrong hands, this could be used to abuse the personal rights of many individuals and could be used to target people perceived as political opponents or people perceived as not liked by anybody who is in authority.
This is Top Story brought to you by Telecel Connecting Energies, Holy Insecticide Spray and Coil. Enjoy a holy sleep and also Shield Pension Trust into the future with you. I've been joined on the line by Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, the Member of Parliament for Ofuasi Arabi. Thank you so much, Honorable, for joining us here. Now, is this something your government ever considered when you were in power?
No. We spoke a lot about the threat of misinformation and disinformation, and we rolled out a number of things aimed at helping to deal with that threat, but none of them was aimed at criminalizing speech, as is being done now. And I think it's important to mention that many people think that there's only one law the government is looking at. That is the Cybersecurity Act Amendment Bill. I don't know if it has come into our attention that there's also the misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, and publication of other information bill. I don't know if that has come to your attention.
No, none, but I'll cross-check with my legal desk.
Okay, so there's actually two pieces of legislation that have been drafted. The second one is the misinformation, disinformation bill, which says that, for example, a station like Joy FM, your license can be revoked if there is the view that you are misinforming. What that will mean is that, for example, where, let's say, government disagrees with you on something, like we did when we were in power, we disagreed with you on something. Under the new law, the government will have the power to have your license suspended or revoked just because they disagree with you. And
per that bill, who determines if a station is misinforming?
So they have created a division under the Cybersecurity Authority, which division is now being given the powers of police, have been given unprecedented funds, is being given the powers to seize and search. I mean, a whole raft of powers that you will find scary. And then they're also empowering some courts to be able to exact some of these actions. Now, the point we have made is that if you disagree with what somebody is saying, and you even need to exact some remedies, criminalizing it is not the way to go. And that from about the 1960s, Ghana has very much spoken against
any law that seeks to suppress dissent or free speech. Because it is these same laws that then you find authoritarian regimes using to suppress freedoms. So around the 1960s, for those who are familiar with history, there was a Preventive Detention Act that was introduced. And it gave a broad scope of what we called security. And if they were of the view that you were doing something inimical to the security of the state or to prejudice the security of the state, then you could be detained. It was that kind of legislation that was then used to detain people for several months, some of who died in prison. You recall the criminal and seditious libel laws, which also sent a lot of people to prison just because the authorities did not find favor with some of the things they were expressing. And today, if you look at the Cybersecurity Authority Amendment Bill, people could go to jail for up to 10 years because they published what is considered by the authorities as false in a group. And now if you come and look at the misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech and publication and other information bill, you, Joy FM, for example, can easily lose your license because the authorities are of the view that what we have published is inimical to the interest of the state, and they define those parameters in various ways as false or as untrue, or one of those expressions that they come up with. So I think what we are saying is that this is dangerous. I think I've even heard other people referring to the fact that we are treading on very dangerous ground. It's important for the government to pull back and rather employ more civil measures like we did in an effort to deal with the very genuine risk of misinformation and disinformation.
So you're saying these are two separate bills. And in terms of the one that says a station can lose its license, is there an opportunity to be created for the station to then justify why it published all that, or per the law, government can go ahead and do what it wants to do if it finds it?
Oh, as for justify, you can justify. But the moment you begin to give such powers, then you can have worries about it being in wrong hands. If I had one of your commentators speak about, you cannot be a clairvoyant and predict who will handle these powers what day. So you don't make some laws at all. If you make them and these laws get into hands that you don't feel comfortable with, you could be in trouble. Today, for example, we have had instances where people write on TikTok and are remanded in police custody for 2 weeks. Nobody in this country can say he's not aware of it. We've had instances where people speak on Facebook and under some criminal provisions, they are remanded in BNI custody, driven in Black Maria vehicles as though they were hardened criminals, just because they said something somebody wasn't happy about. And there's even worry that those remnant laws still criminalize speech should be removed from our statute books. It is therefore worrying that the government wants to deepen it by now saying that they want to pass laws to allow the Cybersecurity Division to suspend or revoke your license.
I'm sure the intent of government is to check how some people are abusing the airspace, that they could sit on radio and say whatever they want without probably evidence. Isn't that something that we all must support, but probably the way that is being handled that we have issues with?
So two things I'll say to that. When they were passing the Preventive Detention Act, this is some of the arguments that people made, that I'm sure the government is trying to sanitize the system. That was the law that was used to leave people in jail until they rotted to death. It can never be a justification to pass bad laws. Second is that, yes, there are excesses. But in 1991, for your listeners who will remember, the Constituent Assembly was considering, for example, Chapter 12 of the current Constitution that we have, and a discussion as to whether we should open up the landscape with the risk of what they called ugly noises. This country, our forebears, agreed that we prefer a system with ugly noises to a culture of silence. For those who are not familiar, there are lots of writings on this. We have gone past that era, and that is why criminal, seditious libel were all repealed. Now, on our watch, we
tried to contain the situation, but not by jailing people for up to 10 years. So I'm sure you recall that when we found instances where journalists were making excesses, instead of proposing laws to jail them for 10 years, we said, let's do a media capacity enhancement program. To the Asante provide the resources for us to start that program of supporting media people who even commit excesses to know how to do it better. You will recall the various public sensitization exercises, conferences, etc., that we held for that. You recall the fact-checking platforms that we encouraged, some of which we launched, Ubawa and all of those ones, the ISD Media Center that we put up to be able to provide fact so that even if you were in doubt, you could go there. You recall when everybody was scared to pass the Right to Information Act, we pushed the RTI Act to be passed. Why? So that if you want information, there's a chance to get the correct information and not misinform or fabricate. So you can deal with it by proactively supporting free expression and in so doing, curbing what causes some of the excesses. Don't deal with it by saying that if you say something I consider false, I'll jail you for up to 10 years. That is something that I think everybody should be very worried about because it's a dangerous of credentials and it should not be countenanced.
How does the minority in Parliament intend to deal with this if this comes to the House?
I'm not communication subcommittee. I am speaking because you called me as a former information minister to speak.
Yes.
But as a member of the minority, engaging the sentiment within our caucus, I am clear that if this draft bill as is finds its way onto the floor, there will be fierce resistance. And I am very sure that the minority will employ every legal avenue available to ensure that these draft provisions do not become part of the laws of the Republic of Ghana. It is dangerous, my brother. Today, you may think it doesn't affect you. Tomorrow, when they are using this law to put you in jail for up to 10 years because you wrote something in your chat group, then you realize that this advocacy that we are doing is in your interest.
Grateful to you, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, for joining us here. He is MP for Ofuase Ayerebida. Let me bring in Selorm Branttie, who's Vice President, IMANI Africa. Selorm, we're all worried about how excesses are on social media, for example. Governments wants to check this, but we feel that the way it is going about it is not probably right. What must government do, or how best can we deal with the excesses? Hello, Selorm, do I have you? Selorm Branttie is Vice President of IMANI Africa. Selorm, if I have you, I want to find out from you how best government can deal with the excesses. We've all said this bill is in the way it is now is not good. But how can government go about it to ensure to have a good bill to deal with the excesses that it wants to check? Hello, Selorm. Okay, let me check. Maybe Selorm is on Zoom. Selorm. Hello. Okay, we'll try it and raise Selorm again. Selorm, if I have you, I want to find out from you. Once you are someone who's also quite, vocal in this space, government is interested, per what we hear, to check the excesses. What do you think government must do? Once we all say this bill is quite in a bad taste, what should government do to get it right? Selorm, do I have you?
Yes.
Did you hear my question, sir?
I did.
Okay, great. So I want to pick your thought on what you think government can do to get it right.
Yes. So I believe that this is a time for a lot of extensive consultation to be done to ensure that the will of the people is heard. I believe that the discussions have been extensive enough with regard to the provisions of the bill, especially with the fact that having a digital alias should not be something that should be warranted as a criminal activity, especially in the context of how ambiguous some of these provisions are. And it therefore means that we will need to have the letter of the law or the draft bill very clear and unambiguous in terms of the stipulations that it offers, so that we do not have people misinterpreting or using it for their advantage, because it might not even be this government, but whoever decides, or might not be this current minister, but whoever decides that they would want to use this to clamp down or gag people, we would have basically an open field to do so, because a lot of these things are subject to the interpretation of whoever is in charge. And this is not how we should do laws, especially when it comes to issues of people communicating freely with each other, sharing ideas, or even doing things like satire, for example, or trying to do write things under pseudonyms, because it is just like how if you wanted to write something under a pen name, for example, and there's things like this, some of these things would be considered illegal, and for you to be liable to go to jail. So I believe that this is the time that we all need to come together as a people and then decide that these are the thresholds we want to use, or these are the thresholds under which we want to operate, and then very clear about what the boundaries or barriers are, and that we should not use this to stifle free speech or gag independent voices or voices that need to be heard, that the nation needs to hear.
Should government scrap this bill and probably come back with a better one?
They don't need to scrap it. There are certain provisions that are very important, especially with the new, with the slew of new digital products and services that are coming into the system. But what they do need to do is to ensure that the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution for individuals or for small businesses or for body corporates are safeguarded to the extent that it cannot be used or abused by people who are in power for inquisitorial purposes.
Selorm, I'm grateful to you for joining us here. Selorm Branttie is Vice President, IMANI Africa. This has been Top Story, brought to you by Telecel Connecting Energies, Holy Insecticide Spray and Coil Enjoy, Holy Sleep, and also by Shield Pension Trust. Into the future with you. My name is Samuel Kojo Brace. Up next is Newsnight, right after these.
I send them, you get them.